it chapter by chapter, one bite at a time. So many adventures and mountains we can climb. Take it word for word, line by line, one bite at a time.
Welcome to Bite at a Time Books, where we read you your favorite classics one bite at a time. My name is Bree Carlile, and I love to read, and wanted to share my passion with listeners like you. If you want to know what's coming next and vote on upcoming books, sign up for our newsletter at biteatatimebooks.com. You'll also find our new t-shirts in the shop, including podcast shirts and quote shirts from your favorite classic novels. Be sure to follow my show on your favorite podcast platform so you get all the new episodes. You can find most of our links in the show notes, but also our website, biteatatimebooks.com, includes all of the links for our show, including to our Patreon to support the show, and YouTube, where we have special behind the narration of the episodes. We're part of the Bite at a Time Books Productions Network. If you'd also like to hear what inspired your favorite classic authors to write their novels, and what was going on in the world at the time, check out the Bite at a Time Books Behind the Story podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. Please note, while we try to keep the text as close to the original as possible, some words have been changed to honor the marginalized communities who've identified the words as harmful, and to stay in alignment with Bite at a Time Books' brand values. Today we'll be continuing Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. Chapter 3. To wit, the Plan of Paris in 1727. 300 paces further on, he arrived at a point where the street forked. It separated into two streets which ran in a slanting line, one to the right and the other to the left. Jean Valjean had before him what resembled the two branches of a Y. Which should he choose? He did not hesitate, but took the one on the right. Why? Because that to the left ran towards a suburb, that is to say, towards inhabited regions, and the right branch towards the open country, that is to say, towards deserted regions. However, they no longer walked very fast. Cosette's pace retarded Jean Valjean's. He took her up and carried her again. Cosette laid her head on the shoulder of the good man and said not a word. He turned round from time to time and looked behind him. He took care to keep always on the dark side of the street. The street was straight in his rear. The first 2 or 3 times that he turned round, he saw nothing. The silence was profound, and he continued his march, somewhat reassured. All at once, on turning round, he thought he perceived in the portion of the street which he had just passed through, far off in the obscurity, something which was moving. He rushed forward precipitately rather than walked, hoping to find some side street to make his escape through it, and thus to break his scent once more. He arrived at a wall. This wall, however, did not absolutely prevent further progress. It was a wall which bordered a transverse street in which the one he had taken ended. Here again, he was obliged to come to a decision. Should he go to the right or to the left? He glanced to the right. The fragmentary lane was prolonged between buildings which were either sheds or barns, then ended at a blind alley. The extremity of the cul-de-sac was distinctly visible, a lofty white wall. He glanced to the left. On that side the lane was open, and about 200 paces further on ran into a street of which it was the affluent. On that side lay safety. At the moment when Jean Valjean was meditating a turn to the left, in an effort to reach the street which he saw at the end of the lane, he perceived a sort of motionless black statue at the corner of the lane, and the street towards which he was on the point of directing his steps. It was someone, a man who had evidently just been posted there, and who was barring the passage and waiting. Jean Valjean recoiled. The point of Paris where Jean Valjean found himself, situated between the Faubourg Saint-Antoine and La Râpée, is one of those which recent improvements have transformed from top to bottom, resulting in disfigurement according to some, and in a transfiguration according to others. The market gardens, the timber yards, and the old buildings have been effaced. Today, there are brand new wide streets, arenas, circuses, hippodromes, railway stations, and a prison. Mazas there. Progress, as the reader sees with its antidote. Half a century ago, in that ordinary, popular tongue which is all compounded of traditions, which persists in calling the Institut Les Quadranations and the Opera Comique Feydeau, the precise spot whither Jean Valjean had arrived was called Les Petites Picpus, the Porte Saint-Jacques, the Porte Paris, the Barrière des Sergeants, the Porcherons, les Galiotes, les Celestins, les Capuchins, les Melles, le Barbe, l'Arbre des Cracovie, la Petite Pelone. These are the names of old Paris which survive amid the new. The memory of the populace hovers over these relics of the past. Les Petites Picpus, which, moreover, hardly ever had any existence, and never was more than the outline of a quarter, had nearly the monkish aspect of a Spanish town. The roads were not much paved. The streets were not much built up. With the exception of the 2 or 3 streets of which we shall presently speak, all was wall and solitude there. Not a shop, not a vehicle, hardly a candle lighted here and there in the windows. All lights extinguished after 10 o'clock. Gardens, convents, timber yards, marshes, occasional lowly dwellings, and great walls as high as the houses. Such was this quarter in the last century. The Revolution snubbed it soundly. The Republican government demolished and cut through it. Rubbish chutes were established there. 30 years ago, this quarter was disappearing under the erasing process of new buildings. Today, it has been utterly blotted out. The Petite Picpus, of which no existing plan has preserved a trace, is indicated with sufficient clearness in the plan of 1727, published at Paris by Denis Thierry, Rue Saint-Jacques, opposite the Rue des Plâtres, and at Lyons by Jean Gerin, Rue Messier, at a sign of prudence. Petite Picpus had, as we have just mentioned, a Y of streets, formed by the Rue des Chemins Vert Saint-Antoine, which spread out in 2 branches, taking on the left the name of Little Picpus Street, and on the right the name of the Rue Polonceau. The 2 limbs of the Y were connected at the apex as by a bar. This bar was called Rue Droit Mur. The Rue Polonceau ended there. Rue Petite Picpus passed on, and ascended towards the Lenoir Market. A person coming from the sign reached the extremity of the Rue Polonceau, and had on his right the Rue Droit Mur, turning abruptly at a right angle in front of him the wall of that street, and on his right a truncated prolongation of the Rue Droit Mur, which had no issue and was called the Cul-de-sac Genrot. It was here that Jean Valjean stood. As we have just said, on catching sight of that black silhouette standing on guard at the angle of the Rue Droit Mur and the Rue Petite Picpus, he recoiled. There could be no doubt of it. That phantom was lying in wait for him. What was he to do? The time for retreating was past. That which he had perceived in movement an instant before, in the distant darkness, was Javert and his squad without a doubt. Javert was probably already at the commencement of the street at whose end Jean Valjean stood. Javert, to all appearances, was acquainted with this little labyrinth, and had taken his precautions by sending one of his men to guard the exit. These surmises, which so closely resembled proofs, whirled suddenly like a handful of dust caught up by an unexpected gust of wind, through Jean Valjean's mournful brain. He examined the cul-de-sac Genrot. There he was cut off. He examined the Rue Petite Picpus. There stood a sentinel. He saw that black form standing out in relief against the white pavement, illuminated by the moon. To advance was to fall into this man's hands. To retreat was to fling himself into Javert's arms. Jean Valjean felt himself caught, as in a net which was slowly contracting. He gazed heavenward in despair. Thank you for joining Bite at a Time Books today, while we read a bite of one of your favorite classics. Again, my name is Bree Carlile, and I hope you come back tomorrow for the next bite of Les Miserables. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter at biteatatimebooks.com and check out the shop. You can check out the show notes or our website, biteatatimebooks.com, for the rest of the links for our show. We'd love to hear from you on social media as well.